He said if the black kid could speak one word of Chinese, he'd give his job to the boy's mother. The room laughed. They didn't know he'd been fluent since he was 16, or that in 7 minutes, he'd own the deal, the company, and the billionaire's apology. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days over Manhattan, turning the streets into shimmering mirrors that reflected the cold arrogance of steel towers and private fortunes. Inside the penthouse suite of the Vanderlyn Tower, 47 floors above the city that never sleeps, a different kind of storm was brewing. Alexander Vanderlyn, tech billionaire and founder of Axiom Dynamics, leaned back in his hand-stitched Italian chair, swirling a glass of 30-year Macallan like it was water. Around him sat investors from Singapore, Berlin, and Dubai, all waiting for the final signature on a $750 million AI infrastructure deal. But something was wrong. Mr. Li, the quiet but formidable chairman of Shenzhen Nova Group, had just spoken for 4 minutes in rapid-fire Mandarin, his tone shifting from polite inquiry to sharp frustration. No one in the room understood a word. The hired interpreter had missed her flight. And now, the deal, the largest in Axiom's history, was slipping through Alexander's manicured fingers like smoke. At the edge of the room, unnoticed as always, stood Jamal Carter. 23 years old, black, wearing a crisp but slightly worn navy uniform with a silver Axiom Guest Services pin. For the past year, Jamal had worked nights cleaning this very penthouse after Alexander's endless strategy sessions. He'd scrubbed coffee rings off billion-dollar blueprints, folded discarded napkins from meetings that shaped global markets, and listened, always listened, to the language of power. But today, he wasn't just cleaning. He'd come early to deliver extra linens, and now he stood frozen near the service door, tray in hand, as Alexander's vice president, Marcus Thorne, turned the crisis into comedy. "Honestly, Alex," Marcus said with a smirk, "if your janitor could translate what Lee just said, I'd hand him my entire equity package. Hell, I'd give his mother my job." The room erupted in nervous laughter. Even Alexander chuckled, though sweat beaded on his temple. Mr. Lee's eyes narrowed. In Chinese culture, disrespect wasn't just rude. It was a deal-breaker. Jamal's mother, Evelyn Carter, had been Alexander's personal housekeeper for 12 years. She cleaned his Hamptons estate, folded his silk shirts, and once held his hand when his father died, quietly, without pay, without thanks. She never asked for more. She believed dignity was its own reward. But Jamal had watched her return home night after night with tired eyes and stories of being spoken over, ignored, or worse, mocked for her accent when she dared to say good morning in English. That's when he made a promise to himself at 16. He would learn the languages of those who held power, not to become them, but to protect her. While working double shifts at a bodega and studying computer science at City College, Jamal spent every spare moment mastering Mandarin. Not just the words, but the tones, the idioms, the unspoken rules of business etiquette. He practiced with elderly Chinese grocers in Flushing, joined language exchange groups online, and even built a rudimentary translation algorithm as a class project. He never told anyone, not even his mother, because in a world that saw him as invisible, his knowledge was his armor and his secret weapon. Back in the penthouse, Marcus wasn't done. "Go on, Jamal," he called out, waving a dismissive hand. "You've been mopping floors here long enough. Maybe you picked up a phrase or two while scrubbing Mr. Lee's shoes?" More laughter. Mr. Lee stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against marble. He said something sharp in Mandarin, something that made Alexander flinch. Jamal understood every word. "I will not sign with men who treat human beings like furniture. My mother cleaned houses too. She deserved more respect than this." The room fell silent. Alexander tried to smooth things over, but Marcus doubled down. "Relax, Alex. It's just the help. They don't feel things like we do." That was the moment Jamal stepped forward. Not with anger, not with bravado, but with calm, unshakable presence. He placed the linen tray on a side table, straightened his shoulders, and spoke, in flawless, native-level Mandarin, directly to Mr. Lee. "Chairman Lee, please accept my deepest apologies for the disrespect shown in this room. I am Jamal Carter, and I would be honored to serve as your translator for the remainder of this meeting. The effect was electric. Mr. Lee's stern expression softened into stunned disbelief. You speak Shanghainese dialect? Jamal nodded. My grandmother was from Pudong. She taught me before she passed. The lie was gentle, necessary, a bridge of shared heritage. In truth, Jamal had learned it from YouTube and sheer will. But it worked. Mr. Lee gestured for him to sit. Alexander stared, mouth slightly open. Marcus scoffed. This is a joke, right? The janitor's playing diplomat now. But Mr. Lee silenced him with a look. In China, he said in careful English, we say, don't judge a river by its surface. This young man has depth. Jamal then translated everything Mr. Lee had said, word for word, tone for tone, including the part about his mother. Alexander turned pale. Marcus tried to laugh it off, but the investors were watching, their expressions unreadable. Then Jamal did something no one expected. He pulled out his phone and opened an app, clean, minimalist, labeled LinguaBridge. Chairman Lee, I noticed a discrepancy in Section 4, Clause B of your contract. The yuan to dollar conversion uses yesterday's rate, not today's. It underestimates your return by 2.3%. Mr. Lee snatched the tablet, scanned the numbers, and his eyes widened. He's right. Jamal didn't stop there. Also, he continued, still in Mandarin, your clause on data sovereignty conflicts with New York State's AI Ethics Act passed last month. If unamended, it could void the entire agreement within 6 months. Alexander shot upright. How do you know that? Jamal met his gaze. I wrote my senior thesis on transnational AI regulation, and I've been following your company's filings since you acquired Neuralabs. The room was utterly still. Marcus finally sputtered. This is insane. He's a cleaner. He doesn't even have a security clearance. But Mr. Lee was already standing, walking toward Jamal with outstretched hands. Young man, you have saved me from a costly mistake and shown more integrity than half the executives I've met in this city. He turned to Alexander. I will sign the deal, but only if Mr. Carter is named lead liaison for our partnership. Alexander hesitated. Marcus exploded. You can't be serious. He's not even on payroll in this division. Mr. Lee's voice dropped to ice. Then find someone else to lose $750 million. The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Then Jamal played his final card. He tapped his phone. A recording began, Marcus's voice clear and mocking. If your janitor could translate, I'd give his mother my job. The room gasped. Marcus turned crimson. You recorded me? That's illegal. No, Jamal said calmly. It's a business meeting in a corporate space with multiple witnesses. And you made a public offer. In New York, verbal contracts can be binding if consideration is exchanged. He looked at Alexander. Your VP promised my mother his position if I translated.
I did.
The position is hers. Evelyn Carter, summoned quietly by Jamal's text, stood in the doorway, her uniform neat, her eyes wide with disbelief. Alexander, cornered and calculating, realized the truth. Keeping Marcus meant losing Mr. Lee, the deal, and possibly his reputation. Firing him meant salvaging everything and gaining a brilliant new asset in Jamal. Marcus, he said quietly, you're relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Marcus staggered back, as if struck. You're choosing them over me? I'm choosing competence over cruelty, Alexander replied. Something you never understood. 6 months later, Evelyn Carter sat in a sunlit office on the 32nd floor of Axiom Tower, not as a housekeeper, but as director of ethical operations, a role created just for her. Her salary tripled. Her voice now opened board meetings. Jamal, meanwhile, had been fast-tracked into Axiom's AI ethics division, where his LinguaBridge app was being scaled globally. Mr. Lee became his mentor, funding a nonprofit Jamal launched, Keys to Tongues, offering free language and tech training to kids in underserved communities. As for Marcus, he vanished from the elite circuit, his name whispered as a cautionary tale. Remember Vanderlyn? The guy who mocked the janitor and lost everything. One rainy afternoon, he showed up at Axiom's lobby, hat in hand, asking for a second chance. Jamal met him in the atrium. "I'm not here to forgive you," Jamal said gently. "But I'll tell you this. The world doesn't care how smart you think you are. It cares how you treat people when no one's watching." Marcus left with nothing but that truth echoing in his ears. Back in the penthouse that day, after the contracts were signed and the champagne poured, Mr. Lee pulled Jamal aside. "Why didn't you reveal yourself sooner?" Jamal smiled. "Because dignity isn't about being seen. It's about being ready when the moment comes." And as he looked out over the same city that once rendered him invisible, he knew his mother's quiet strength had built this victory far more than any algorithm. The best revenge wasn't shouting from the rooftops. It was standing calmly in the room where they laughed at you and speaking their language better than they ever could. Competence, after all, needs no permission. It only needs an opening. And sometimes, all it takes is one arrogant bet to hand you the keys to the kingdom. If this story moved you, if you believe that brilliance wears many faces and speaks many tongues, then share it. Because somewhere out there, another Jamal is listening, learning, waiting. And the world needs to hear him. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, no matter where you're watching from. Whether you're in Nigeria, Brazil, India, the US, or the Philippines, if you've ever been counted out, this channel is for you. Share it, because talent has no passport and dignity speaks every language.